Life has a way of throwing you curveballs, doesn't it? Here I am, Joan, with my life's chapters so neatly organized like my accounting books, and just like that, everything's tipped out of balance. I work with numbers because they make sense to me, add and subtract, debit and credit, nothing unexpected. But no amount of reconciliation prepares you for personal loss. My second husband, George, the man who filled our lives with laughter and warmth, was gone in the blink of an eye, leaving a void no number could quantify. Now, it's just me and my memories of him, and Ellie, my bright, 20-year-old stepdaughter who's currently tackling college. My own kid, Mike, he's a different story. Pulled together, sharp in a suit, practically a mirror image of me at that age, but with the added fire of youth. He married Sarah. Oh, she's a piece of work. You can read ambition all over her face, and not necessarily the good kind. They were both over the other day. Supposed to be helping me sort through George's stuff, God knows there's enough of it, but it was turning into more of a drag than help, especially when Sarah found the jewelry set. It was a real beauty, shiny stones, intricate gold work, the sort of thing that's been in George's family for ages. Ellie's birthright, by all accounts. Sarah, she zeroed in on that set like a hawk on a field mouse. Joan, oh my God, check this out, she squealed, as she flicked her phone out and started snapping pictures. Easy there, Sarah, I called out, a bit startled by her enthusiasm. She fluttered around, barely listening to me. Can I take this with me? Can I? Now, I've never been one to shuffle words around. No, Sarah, I said, firm but calm as the day is long. That's Ellie's. It's been promised to her. The change in Sarah's demeanor was instant. Like a switch had flipped. Her face twisted up, her eyes went cold. She didn't even pretend to keep up the sweet daughter-in-law act. Really, Joan? After all we've been doing for you? Her voice was sharp, like she was trying to cut something open. I didn't budge an inch. Yeah, really, I shot back. Not raising my voice, but making damn sure she could hear me loud and clear. Ellie's his daughter. It's her family's. End of. With a huff that could have blown the house down, she turned on her heel and marched out, not even bothering to slam the door. Good riddance, I thought. Mike, he just shrugged it off, raking a hand through his hair as if he had bigger things on his mind. She'll get over it, Mom, he mumbled before following his storm of a wife out the door. I just shook my head, leaning against the cold marble counter. Is this what family comes down to? I muttered to myself. Sorting through George's things, I paused now and then to wipe my eyes. Funny how the world can shift on its axis in such a short time. I was just about to close the living room curtains when my phone rang, cutting through the quiet, just like that unexpected visitor who shows up right when you've settled in for the evening. Mike's picture flashed on the screen. My heart did a small somersault. We hadn't parted on the best of terms last we spoke, on account of Sarah and the jewelry. Hey, Mom, he started, no hellos, no how are yous. His voice was as tight as a drum, you could tell he was walking on eggshells. Sarah's pretty torn up about the whole, jewelry thing. I sighed, loud enough for him to hear. Mike, we talked about this already. That set belongs to Ellie. It's not just some trinket. He cut me off, quick as a whip. But Mom, she's really upset. She's been crying and everything. Ellie's got so much coming her way. What's one jewelry set to her? The irritation gnawed at me, hot and unyielding. Ellie has as much claim to it as Sarah has to the tears she's shedding, I said. My words were blunt, but I wasn't in the mood to sugarcoat things. Mike's voice rose, incredulous. Are you serious, Mom? We're talking about Sarah here. My wife. And I'm talking about Ellie, your stepsister. The daughter of the man who left the jewelry set behind. I fired back, the sting of disbelief thick in my voice. There was a beat of silence before Mike snapped. She could use some support too, Support's one thing, Mike, I said, my words sharp, but gifting her your sister's inheritance is something else. Tell Sarah to get her own. He wasn't going to back down. She feels like you don't care about her, about us. You're pushing your own son away. My patience was wearing thinner than an old dime. That's not fair, and you know it. If she wants jewelry, there's plenty of shops around. Mike huffed into the phone, a bitter sound. Wow, Mom, just wow. Yeah, wow, I echoed, my voice heavy with sarcasm before I could stop myself. Try putting your family first for once. That's when the line went dead, the click echoing like a door slamming in my head. I stared at the phone for a long minute before I dropped it onto the couch next to me. I was shaking, a cocktail of anger and hurt seething in my chest. I wasn't the bad guy here, was I? The house was silent around me, the weight of the confrontation heavy in the air. In that moment, I understood how greed could grab hold of someone, twist up their insides, and squeeze until they no longer recognized right from wrong. When Ellie came back home, the front door barely whispered its usual creak. Her eyes were red, telltale signs that she'd given in to the tears the way we all do when life gets too heavy. We wrapped our arms around each other, nothing needed to be said. The ache of losing George hung in the air, thick and palpable, but it was a sort of comfort having her close. Later we sat, sifting through old photos, chuckling through the wetness in our eyes as we placed memories onto the mantel, like building a little shrine to the man who'd meant the world and then some. That's when Mike and Sarah decided to barge in, no knocking, no bell. They pounded into the quiet like a clap of thunder, not caring much for the mood. Hey, we need to talk, Sarah announced, her eyes darting toward Ellie. We'll give you $4,000 for that jewelry set. Just like that, all business, like she was buying a used couch off the internet. Ellie's lips tightened, the shadow of her dad's stubbornness right there on her face. That set has been in my family for generations. It's staying in the family. And $4,000? It's worth more than that. Sarah launched right back at her, words sharp and mean. You don't need it. You probably won't even wear it. Her voice was rising, enough to shake the framed pictures. I got up, my legs stiff. I walked over to Sarah, standing closer than I usually do, mustering all the calm I had left. You'll do well to keep a civil tongue in your head. Sarah's face twisted into something ugly, her nostrils flaring. Mike stood aside, tight-lipped, looking at his shoes as if they were the most interesting things in the world. Enough, I said, my voice sounded strange in my ears, too calm. Out of my house. Now. Mike finally looked up, his eyes mean slits. So it's always Ellie, huh? No room for your son? For your daughter-in-law? His words, stupid and sharp, tried to get under my skin. I let them glance off me. Out, I said again, a steel thread in my voice, before I lose my temper. They went, Sarah slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass in the windows, leaving Ellie and me in the freshly stirred silence. We sat back down, suddenly so tired, clinging to each other. We didn't have to talk about it, we just knew. This kind of grief, it was heavy enough without adding a side of greed and ugly words. The farewell to my husband was a somber sea of black attire and hushed voices. Neighbors, poker buddies, and partners from the firm, George's absence left a hole in the lives of many. As Ellie and I clung to each other, a steady stream of George's friends and our family offered their embraces and whispered comforts. He was a good man, they said. The best, another would agree, shaking their head. The steady cadence of condolences was almost rhythmic, apologies, tissues passed, hands held. Some recalled George with stories that brought smiles even through the tears. He could fix anything, a cousin recalled. Remember that barbecue when he saved the day with duct tape? That got a few watery chuckles. But in all this, there was a glaring empty space. Mike and Sarah. My own son and daughter-in-law were conspicuously absent, a silence that screamed louder than any words of comfort could soothe. Nobody mentioned it, but their absence was a specter over the whole affair. After the ceremony, weighted by the heaviness of the day, Ellie and I returned home. Our door was a mess, wood splintered all around the lock. I felt my stomach drop. I knew what they were after before we even saw the empty space in the wall where the safe used to be. "We've been robbed," Ellie said. Her eyes were wide, scared, but mad too. I was shaking, anger boiling inside me like nothing before. Went straight for the security system, pulled up the footage, and there they were, Mike and Sarah, faces clear as day. I didn't even think. Grabbed the phone and dialed his number. When he picked up, trying to sound all sleepy and innocent like, I nearly lost it. "If you don't get those heirlooms back here within the hour, I'm ringing the police." My voice was like ice. At first, there was silence, then Sarah, never one to miss a chance to jab, snorted, "You wouldn't dare." It was like she threw fuel right into my fire. "You think I'm playin', girl?" My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "You're on camera. Both of ya. As clear as daylight, stuffin' my heritage into your dirty pockets." There was a beat of silence, then Mike. He had this squeak in his voice when he got scared. "Mom, we..." "Shut up, Mike," Sarah cut in, her voice twisted with something nasty. "She's bluffing." I didn't miss a beat. Cameras don't lie, Sarah. And they sure don't bluff. I wanted to reach through that phone and wipe that smug tone right off her face. "You got one chance to make it right. You hear me? One." Mike was begging now. "Please, Mom, I can explain." "Ain't nothing to explain. You broke into my house and stole from Ellie, from me, from your dad's memory." "You can't prove it," Sarah said, but her voice wavered. She knew the game was up. I laughed, but there wasn't no humor in it. "Oh, I can. And I will. Get those jewels back or get ready to talk to the cops about what you did." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, heart racing. Never thought it would come to this. Ellie was crying again, the kind of tears you cry when you're so mad you can't see straight. We cleaned up the mess they made, but it was like a bad taste that wouldn't go away. We waited, but a part of me, a big part, knew they weren't gonna make it right. Some folks, they just don't know how. Mike stomped in the next morning like he owned the place, overnight bags under his eyes telling stories of a sleepless night. Without a hello, he chucked a bag onto the ground where it hit with a pathetic sound and slid a few inches before stopping. Its contents jingled, echoing eerily in the tense air. I bent down, my heart racing, and unzipped the bag. Inside, jewelry pieces spilled out. But something was off. The color wasn't quite right, they lacked the weight of real gold and the sparkle of true jewels. Ellie, who had been biting her lip in silent hope, let out a whimper, her hand shaking as she picked up a necklace that looked like a toy you'd win at a carnival. "What is this crap, Mike?" I spat the question out. The necklace felt cold and light in my palm. "They're the jewels, Mom," Mike mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. I squinted down at the necklace in my hand, turning it over. It was then I noticed the clasp was too shiny, too clean for something that was supposed to be decades old. My blood went from simmer to boil in a split second. "Jewels?" I laughed, bitter and loud. It was too much. "You think I'm an idiot?" Mike shifted from one foot to another, a twitch starting in his cheek. "Well, that's what we grabbed." "Grabbed from where, a damn costume shop?" I threw the necklace back into the bag. It landed with a plastic clack that said everything we needed to know. Ellie burst out, tears streaming down her face, accusations mixed with sobs. "How could you do this to us? To your own family?" I should have felt something looking at my son standing there, this broken man-child we raised. But all I felt was a cold hard anger. It was clear even the semblance of family was gone, burned up by greed and lies. "Mom, Mike started, but his words were slurred by the corner of his mouth that wouldn't stop twitching. "Save it," I found myself saying, cutting him off. The weight of the phone in my hand was suddenly the only real thing in the room. Mike's eyes darted to the phone. "Come on, you're not really gonna call the cops on your own son, are you? Watch me." The numbers on the keypad felt oddly solid under my fingertips. "This is the last straw. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I stood firm, phone to my ear, as the dial tone buzzed, waiting for my next move. I gave you a chance to fix this mess. And look what you brought me. Cheap fakes. Mom, I swear to you. But even as Mike tried to speak, there was a shifty, desperate look in his eyes that told me he had no truth to offer. The ringing stopped, replaced by the operator's voice. 911, what is your emergency? I glanced at Ellie, her face streaked with tears, the fake jewels lying discarded between us, and back at Mike, who looked like a cornered animal. Yes, I said into the phone, my voice steady. I'd like to report a theft. I was standing in my kitchen, trying to make sense of the chaos the past hours had unleashed, when the call came in. It was brief. The cops had turned over Mike and Sarah's place and found what was missing, plus a little performance from Sarah for free. Pulling up to the station, I couldn't help the acid churning in my stomach. Walking in, the officer on duty nodded at me. We found your items, he said. No pleasantries, just down to business as usual. Sarah was in full drama mode when I saw her behind the glass, flaring up the second she spotted me. This is all your fault, Joan, she screamed, her face a twisted snarl of blame and mascara trails. Excuse me? I couldn't help my eyebrow shooting up. You two are the ones in hot water, not me. But you pushed him into it, she shrieked, hands gripping the bars, knuckles white. I shook my head. No, Sarah. You pushed. You screamed for diamonds and he jumped. Mike sat there, head hung low, not even a shadow of fight left in him. When our eyes met, he muttered, I just love her too much, all right? Love? I snorted. Is that what you call it? Looks more like stupid to me. Watch your mouth, Sarah snapped like a cornered animal. Spare me, honey, your act doesn't work on me. The back and forth could have gone on for hours, but I had enough. I needed answers. Why did you do it, Mike? Why'd you take from your stepsister? His voice was soft, resigned. I told you, I love her. She wanted those jewels so bad. And you thought stealing was the way to go? The words were out before I could help myself. Mike shuffled his feet, glanced at Sarah who was biting back words now, realizing maybe that silence was her best defense. Mike looked up, his eyes begging me to understand something that I couldn't. I didn't think it would hurt anyone. I stood there, feeling a gulf miles wide stretch between us. But it did, Mike. It really did. Seeing my eyes, maybe the steel in them, he deflated. I'm sorry, Mom. I messed up. Sarah was quiet now, watching, perhaps realizing the mess she'd coaxed Mike into was unraveling fast. I can't fix this, Mike. You're going to have to face the music on this one. I know, he said, and for a second he wasn't the man who had broken my trust, just the boy who used to call me Mom in that soft way that tugged at my heartstrings. I turned my back on both of them, Sarah's silent sobs and Mike's apologies fading as I walked out the station door. There was nothing left to say. The damage was done. It was out of my hands now, and in the arms of the law. As I sat there in the courtroom's stiff chair, my back aching from tension and the chill of justice about to be served, I had a sinking feeling. Mike and Sarah, dressed in their not quite I'm innocent but I'll try courthouse best, were out of options and out of favors. The judge had the kind of stern look you don't forget, not after you've been on the receiving end of it. The prosecutor was laying it on thick, words like calculated theft and breach of trust hanging in the air. Mike and Sarah's lawyer did his song and dance, talking about how they were good people who just made a bad mistake. Folks who fell on hard times, he said. I caught Mike's eye. He was pale, looking like he'd gladly swap places with anyone in the room. The judge called for order, and the room hushed to a standstill. Then he laid it out. The evidence against you is conclusive. The trust you've broken is not something that this court takes lightly. Sarah was fidgeting, a jittery energy about her. Your Honor, we really didn't mean any. Silence in my courtroom. The judge's gavel came down like a thunderclap, snapping us all upright. Sarah clammed up, looking like she might burst. The jury didn't need long, guilty on all counts. When the sentences were read, I could barely hold it together. Mike got 3 years and Sarah 5, no chance of parole. As they led Mike away, he turned to me, his voice just above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom." My heart was heavy, a mother's love wrestling with the cold hard need for justice. "You did this to yourself," I said, the words like lead on my tongue. Sarah tried to play tough, always the actress, but her voice shook as she spat. "This is your doing, Joan." I fixed her with a look my own mother would have been proud of. "No, Sarah. You too did this. And now you'll do the time." The courtroom buzzed with the shuffle of feet and soft murmurs of the crowd, but I sat still, letting the reality sink in. My own son, behind bars because he couldn't say no to his wife, and a daughter-in-law who would trade anything for a bit of sparkle, even her freedom. The hustle of people moving out didn't move me. I sat there until a friendly bailiff came over. "Ma'am, we need to clear the room." I nodded and got up, my legs stiff. "Yeah. I'm going." I didn't look back as I left the courthouse, the sky too bright for such a dark day. My heart was empty, but the truth had been laid bare, and they would pay for their choices. It was a hard lesson, but it was one they had to learn. The law had spoken, my conscience was clear, but the road ahead was nothing short of tough. It was over, at least for now. The rest was up to them. All right, so I had the jewels locked up tight in the safety box, the kind down at the bank with all those hefty doors and pin codes like something out of a spy film. They're collecting dust and Ellie probably better off for it. Ellie was flipping through one of those gossip mags, lounging on the sofa. Our moments were quiet now, soaking in the still of our gotta-get-by house, like 2 peas in a pod. And that's something. The phone rang, shattering our quiet little bubble. It was Mike calling from his concrete suite. "Mom, I'm sorry, all right? I was a fool," he said, voice echoing off those prison walls. "Sorry's only the start, kiddo. You've gotta make it right." I pressed the phone against my ear, feeling the warmth like it was his cheek. In the background, I could hear other prisoners, their calls, their yells. A whole chorus of mistakes. "I know, Mom. It's just hard." A hot sigh escaped me. Hard's just another word for life, boy. You get strong or you get gone. You make your choices. Silence chewed at the line for a second. "I hear ya," he finally said. Ellie caught my eye, and she mouthed, "He's still your kid." I nodded at her, a lump in my throat the size of a fist. "You work it out in there, Mike. You hear?" "Yeah, Mom, I will." We hung up and I felt the air weigh down on me. Ellie scooted closer, shoulder to shoulder. "He means it, Joan." I nodded again. "Hope's the last to die," I muttered. Turning in for the night, I felt the sack of worries loosen just a touch. Mike had messed up big time, but he had a good head on his shoulders when he used it. Ellie, well, she was tough as nails, even if she didn't always see it. The world didn't stop spinning for anybody, no matter how hard you fell. We'd pick ourselves up, dust off, and start the climb again, because that's what you did. That's what we'd always do. And it didn't matter how fancy your words were, actions, they spoke the loudest. Ellie's steady breathing from her room was the night's comfortable soundtrack as I settled into bed. Yes, life was a mess, tangled and raw. But we were still kicking. And tomorrow, we'd kick even harder.